So we know that when we want to create multiple objects of the same kind, like users in this case, then object literal notation is not always the best way to do that by copying and pasting these objects over and over and over. Now it would be nice if we could do something like this instead. Whenever we want a new object, just say new user and pass in the values for the different properties. And we can do this in JavaScript, and we can do it in a couple of different ways. Now, one way is to use the prototype model directly, which is the original way that we did this in JavaScript. But with the release of ES6, which is a newer JavaScript specification, we can now do this using the class keyword as well. Now, classes are just a bit of syntactic sugar, meaning that under the hood, it still uses the same original prototype model that we used before classes came about to do this kind of thing. But classes aim to make our code a little bit cleaner and easier to understand. Now we will be learning about the prototype model and the inner workings of what's happening under the hood later on, because only then will you have a real understanding of how objects in JavaScript really behave. And because, like I just said, classes in JavaScript are just a bit of syntactic sugar to make working with objects a little easier. But to begin with, I want to gently introduce the idea of classes until we get a basic grasp of what object-oriented programming is all about, and then we'll dive deeper into the prototype model under the hood. So then, a class is like a blueprint for an object. It describes how to create one with all of its base properties and functionality. So for example, imagine in real life we had a blueprint for a car. Now that blueprint would describe all of the basic properties and functionality of a car. It has properties like a colour and a model, an engine size, and it has functionality, things it can do. It can drive, reverse and brake. So that blueprint for the car maps out all of these properties and its functionality, and all cars created using this blueprint would have those things. Now, that's not to say that every car should be completely identical. Some of the properties could be unique to each car. For example, the colour of it. Some could be red, others green, others blue, etc. But they still all have a colour property. So when we use this blueprint to create cars, we could specify some options, like the colour. We could say we want a new white car, or a new yellow car, or a new green car. And all of those cars are still going to have all of the same properties and functionality. They can all drive, reverse, brake, etc. They all have a make, a model, and a colour. It's just that we're giving them different values for some of these properties. Now, the same principle applies to objects in JavaScript. Only in JavaScript, we use a class to describe the type of object instead of a blueprint. So this would look something like that. We'd have a class which describes what properties and what methods an object should have. In this case, a user class could have a username, email, a login function, and a logout function. So every user created with the user class would have these properties and these methods. But again, each user could have a unique email and a unique username. So we could say new user, pass in a username and an email. Create another one, pass in a different username and a different email, and so forth. But each time we're using the user class to create a new user object, and they all have these properties and all have these methods, but the values of some of the properties can be specified when we create that user so that they're unique. And once we have a user class defined and stored somewhere, we can then call upon it from anywhere in our application code to create a new user object. So we know that classes are a bit like blueprints for objects. Let's now try to create one.